I would like to welcome you all to Experiences of Race in Our Human Family to help foster healing and understanding and unity in our community. The Baha'is of Brookhaven have invited you all to come and join us as we learn about the experiences of life in America as a person of color. Baha'is see race as the most challenging issue. It is said that acceptance of the oneness of humanity demands that prejudice, whether racial, religious, or gender related, must be totally eliminated. Misconceptions and prejudice that consider one group of people as superior to another are a major contributor to humanity's present afflictions. Prejudice is a false perception or a preconception of others based on ignorance, blinding us to the fact that every person is essentially a spiritual being with unique talents and capacities, a mind rich in gems of inestimable value. Further, racism retards the potentialities of its victims, corrupts its perpetrators, and blights human progress. If this problem is to be overcome, the oneness of humanity must be universally upheld and protected by law and through social policies. So, to help us understand these effects, we have invited two panelists to share and reflect on how racism and racial bias have impacted their lives. This represents the first of a series of these panelists, which we are planning to have in the coming months. And at each of these, we're going to invite maybe one or two individuals who will share their experiences. Since we believe that this is one of the ways we can help build empathy towards the situation that our fellow brothers and sisters are facing. And one of the ways to do that, we think, is through the process of storytelling. It is really, I think, how we can be able to change the world, because this builds bonds between people which are powerful and basically allow people to come in and to meet people where they are at.
So our first panelist is Gary Dunn, who I've known personally for many, many years now. I think I first got to know Gary back in the early 2000s when I came here as a graduate student. And I can tell you personally, he is one of the most kindest, empathetic, and helpful individuals I've ever been the pleasure of knowing. He's always someone who just doesn't matter. He'll pitch in and help you out, even in the most difficult circumstances. He's going to always be there for you. So I'm very pleased and honored to be able to introduce him to you all. Now, a little bit about Gary, so you kind of, those of you who don't know him personally. Gary emigrated from Costa Rica to the United States in the 1960s with his two brothers and two sisters. He attended high school in Westbury and embraced Baha'u'llah's cause in 1970 while still in high school. After graduating, he attended Nassau Community College and graduated with an associate in applied science, instrumentation technology. Later, he attended New York Institute of Technology and graduated with a bachelor's of science degree. After school, he worked as a reliability engineer for L'Oreal Electronics. He later married his longtime and white girlfriend, Joan Schur, on Flag Day, and continued working at L'Oreal Electronics for 3 years. Later, he transferred to AIL Electronics on Long Island, working on the B-1 Lancer strategic bomber aircraft by Rockwell. Then later by Boeing, working on the variable sweep wings of heavy bombers used by the United States Air Force. AIL Electronics provided the countermeasures and intercept equipment. Gary worked at AIL Electronics for 9 years as a reliability engineer. Later, he switched careers to computer networking at Long Island Community Hospital, where he has been for the past 12 years. He has three wonderful daughters and four grandchildren. Gary likes to work in his yard during his free time, and he is a member of the Brookhaven Baha'i Spiritual Assembly and works in the community to try and uplift it spiritually through devotional gatherings and meetings to study the Word of God. So without further ado, let's welcome Gary. And sorry, and let me stop sharing here so that you guys can all introduce Gary. Go ahead.
Thank you for all the positive things. It's my pleasure to be able to share with you what I experienced as an African American over the last, I guess, 50 years almost. Wow, I'm that old. So I just wanted to share with you some of the things that I was exposed to, and it's very difficult. And initially, like I would sort of like try to play it around and say now, but as stuff just kept piling up, and it blows your mind. And I know that for me, one of the things that helped me a lot was Billy Roberts started the Black Men Gathering, and I remember going there, and it was such a wonderful thing because these were so like mostly all Black men, young and old, and we share our experience what happened to us, and we cried because you have to get it out. We cry and we hug each other, and I think that was such a wonderful thing for me because I was going through some very difficult times. And also, the Baha'i faith also helped me a lot, which is a religion where I would pray a lot. Like the concourse, and I would always sometime come to my assistance. So, without any further, let me tell you what happened to me. Uh, my first exposure to racism was in 1968, immigrating with my brothers and sisters to the United States of America, arrived at Miami airport, waiting 3 hour layover for my flight to New York. Walking through the airport, sightseeing, we enter a store to look around and purchase some sweets. I noticed one of the employee following us around at a distance. Click in my mind. We are suspect of stealing something from the store. I was between 14 and 15 years old. So it was so difficult because it's sort of like I started thinking, wow, they think I'm a thief, and it goes in your mind. It really, it works with you, and it's sort of like it makes it very difficult. So, we got on the plane to New York, and I was always be thinking about it. Wow, wow, wow. That's the way it is. People are watching you wherever you go because just for your pigmentation. So we got to New York, and my mother, Miller Robinson, she had purchased a house before we arrived to New York, and she purchased a house in Westbury. And when I got there, I think that went into my mind like we were put in the black section because Westbury and all the black section. So I figured, wow, like she was put in the black section because of her pigmentation. And I remember when I was going to school, people would tell me, wow, you better not walk through that area in the white section because they'll try to, tell you to get away, a boy or whatever. And so I avoided that, definitely avoided it. Uh, when I got my car, I had my own car driving, and I remember like I would stop all the time for no reason at all. The police would say, I would say, officer, why are you stopping me? No answer. And this went on all the time. And it really angry and like, frustrated. but I realized I had to keep it cool. But these things built up in your system where you start thinking, wow, you're almost like nothing, They just, they feel they could do anything for you. I remember one time I was driving my car and then I forgot to turn off the I-beam light, and the police officer came around me and stopped, and he said, you're giving me a headache, and like started yelling at me, and I'm saying, wow, I'm sorry, officer. But she was just like yelling and saying, make sure you turn that I-beam off. And that's why you see where there is like within the Black community and the police officer, there's like no correlation. And so a lot of time people get frustrated with they should. And that's what we're seeing occurring throughout the United States now. It's been going on for many years. I remember when I used, Joan was my girlfriend. She's white, my wife, and I would go pick her from our house, and we'd be going by. The police would stop us. They would tell me to get out of the car. They would tell her I got out of the car. They pull her aside and say, "Do your mother know where you are?" All the time, all the time, never fail. And you just see these things just kept building up in your system. Like if you're not worthy, uh, you're not a free man, and that's why we referred to earlier before, like the Black Man Gathering really help a lot, because these were Black men coming together who experience the same situation, and we cry, we pray, we cry, and it helped all of us. So I'm very glad that I attended those things, several times. Uh, I wanted to share something else with you. After I graduated college, I'd gotten a job, and I had proposed to Joan. We got engaged, and we were looking for an apartment. And I remember, like, I always, went to work, it's clean, dressed up nice. I would call the Burke and they say, all right, come to the office. And as I walk in the door and they saw my pigmentation, they would say, what? And they would say, I'm sorry, the apartment is taken. And, many times I would go. So what I started doing was like, I started to like send Joan to inquire for an apartment. And, I figure I'll stay away. And that usually would work, which I remember, okay, so we got an apartment in Hempstead, and the owners who owned the apartment had another apartment in a nicer area. So I told Joan, you better go, because, if I go, what's going to happen? We're going to be turned down. So I sent her there, and the apartment was available, and they said, yeah. Then they discovered that she was the same person who was with me. And then they started saying, okay, you got to give us 3 months ahead of time and this and that. And we say, yeah, and luckily, like, I was working as an engineer and I had the money available. So we gave them the 3 months rent, and we were able to get into the, much nicer apartment. But it just shows you where this thing been going on for time and time and time. And that's why people say, but how come you don't pull yourself up? But when the system is rigged, it's very difficult to pull yourself up, because I went to school, I am educated, I was working, but yet still there is that wall you can't penetrate. It's just very difficult. But I said, like, again, luckily I had people who would support me and to make it easier for me. But yes, it's very difficult. I remember like even in work, like sometimes like people would just, they would just say blatant thing, like if I was invisible, but I dealt with it, you know. But I think if that happened today, I would confront them. I would say, look, lovingly, what you're saying is not right. And I would try to explain to them the process where African American been through, you know, from slavery all the way through now, where, you know, they made it very difficult. You know, people don't realize that. People say, I hear a lot of people say, oh, they're those people, you know, they're on welfare, they don't want to work, et cetera, but they don't realize that from us, you know, when people were brought from Africa, you know, as slave, and after, even after, you know, slavery was abolished, blacks were never given any reparation. A lot of the European community got, you know, a lot of property. So they were always ahead of us, but African American never got those stuff. And but yet still, you know, people don't realize that. Why do you see that they're trying to tear down some of those buildings with Ku Klux Klan names? Because that's really, you know, we have to do it because it's not good for the African American, because we know what we went through and it's very difficult. So it is time for them to remove or put other names in those things. Uh, you know, let me share some other more thing with you. I remember I was I was I was going to a Baha'i meeting in the South Shore in Nassau County. It was, I think was East Hill, whatever. Me and my mother, and we got to the house. We parked the car, and me and my mother was walking to enter the house, and a police officer came by and said, "Hey, boy, what you doing around here?" And I got so angry. And my mother said, "Gary, calm down, calm down, calm down." And that's what like helped me, because I was so, you know, I was so bitter in my heart everywhere. But luckily my mother was with me and she said, "Gary, calm down, calm down. It's okay, Gary, it's okay." And we walked into the event, and I was much calmer. And I try to explain to the people what's happening, but I don't think that they could grasp it. You see, I think they were saying, "Oh, but why would they do that to you?" But I say, "But they do it. You know, I just experience it." But they don't. I think, you know, they don't know, because a lot of people, unfortunately, are brainwashed. You know, the system put this wall against us. So even people who are coming from other countries are saying the same thing. But how come they're not X, Y, and Z? Because they make it difficult for us. You know, we would love to be able to make progress. But, you know, to this day, I don't know if you're aware, like if a Black person try to borrow money from the bank, they're charged more than a white person. To this day, to this day, it's a reality. A lot of people aren't aware of it, but it's that's the way it is. Uh, you know, I also remember a lot of time where I would be walking on the sidewalk, and a white lady was coming, and she would cross over the other side of the road, and I said, "Well, you know, it's all right. You know, that's her priority. That's what you want to." But it just shows you where the system is ingrained in white people, as if though, especially Black male, are like wild or what's the term I'm looking for? Like, you know,
A threat.
yeah,
A
that's right.
threat.
That's right, right, yeah. Where, and you know, they take these positions, they don't know. But I think, you know, it shows you, I think we're seeing what what's happening with people protesting, where there's a lot of young whites and different nationality. I think it seemed like we're making some steps in the right direction, but it's really, it goes deeper than that. So I am grateful and thankful to see what is happening, where we're started to somehow sort of like make reckoning. And then watch a lot of show where like a lot of people are saying, look, you know, especially we have to have a conversation. Why they have to have a conversation between themselves to see what can they do for them to realize that it's not what you see, what they tell you. It goes deeper than that. So I'm willing, if any, you know, other people want to talk to me, I could share with you, you know, why these things are happening. Why a black being incarcerated before? Because the system is rigged. That's the way it is. You know, for example, like school, you know, really like teaching was mainly created for white women, you know, to work as like a thing. And I've seen in many schools where a lot of time, a lot of white teachers don't expect the child to succeed. And if your teacher don't believe you're going to be successful, you're never going to be successful. And you know, they're showing where, you know, for example, if let's say if you're from another culture, another let's say people from let's say Oriental, Chinese, whatever, uh, there's a percentage they're going always going to excel, and if the teacher believe that, they will. So, but they've done a many study where if a child is black and if the teacher don't believe you're going to successful, you're not. And so it's sad because I think every child, I've seen it, every child at first year school, they want to excel, they want to move on. But if your teacher doesn't believe in you, you're not going to make it, which is very sad. So hopefully, uh, I think that we're taking some steps, and it's going to take a while to really solve this thing. But I think that the more people are aware of it, the more we dialogue, it makes it much easier. So where you would think that you don't just uh, take the person saying, okay, this person is bad, they're not trying or whatever, but it's the system is rigged against us. And I think that's what I want to say for tonight for now. There's more to say, but I think I want to give my next speaker time to be able to give their side also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks so much, Gary. And I wanted to hand it off to Naomi to introduce our next speaker, and I will share the PowerPoint now.
I just want to echo what Vahid said, and thank you, Gary, for sharing your experiences and for just agreeing to come on here. Just got some wonderful insights. Thank you for your vulnerability. So as Vahid is getting the screen ready to be shared, I would just like to warmly thank Akbar for also agreeing to be one of our speakers tonight. I am lucky to know Akbar as a friend, and he's one of the funniest people I know. If you don't know him, hopefully you can have an opportunity to get to know him. He's always looking to make other people laugh. He also is just an all-around wonderful human being. When he's not working, a lot of his free time is spent in trying to build up community and help others. I know that he also sometimes now spends time working with his wonderful wife, Harriet, in the garden. He just is just a great overall guy to be around. So I'm going to give you some information from his bio, and then we will give it over to him. So Akbar Fishman was actually born Akbar Naim 2X in Brownsville. He was raised poor in the projects of East New York. He was brought up as a Muslim, attending Islamic school from the ages 3 to 5, until the divorce of his parents. He later started public school, entering the 2nd grade, at which point, unbeknownst to him, the school changed his name, dropping the 2X. His father's name was Vernon 29X, so he was forced to adopt his paternal grandfather's last name, which was Owens. Thus, his birth certificate was changed to Akbar Naim Owens. Later, he attended George Westinghouse Vocational and Technical High School, and after graduating, served 4 years in the Army and 1 in the National Guard. It was at this time that he married his first wife, with whom he has 5 children. After finishing his service with the military, he went to trade school, earning an associate's degree in computer technology, and then went on to Strayer College to study computer information systems. In his career, he initially worked on copiers as a tech, but then moved on to working with systems networks as a result of his strong computer skills. More recently, he got married to the wonderful Harriet Fishman. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the wonderful Akbar Fishman.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this. I like the intro, but I remember way back in the 2nd grade, I was introduced to this person named Akbar Naim Owens when I started public school, and I didn't know who that was. My education started, like I said, when I was 3.5 years old, 4, at the Muhammad University of Islam in Manhattan, New York. I've always known myself then as Akbar Naim. My true name is unknown since it was erased from existence from my family's slave owners. I had to leave the school when my parents were divorced. My father was Vernon 29X. His father was George Owens. Owens is the name that stuck with me until I legally changed it to Fishman. Choosing my wife's name, choosing her last name, gave me a liberating freedom, something that I can choose that someone else didn't label me with. Let's go forward a little bit. In the 8th grade, I decided to be an engineer. My teacher informed me that it was not practical. It was a white-collar job, and I should be aiming for a blue-collar job at that time. At the time, I did not know what the hell he was talking about. I was very good at math, science, and history, and not his story, but my history has always been beyond the public school in the classroom, because I always studied history from books my mother gave me, and I always liked checking out library books on history, even though I really hated reading, but I like reading history. I remember one time I was watching my mother, because she went to trade school, and she had this funny looking board, and she had these resistors and capacitors, a transistor, and this little square chip on it, and it was counting. And I asked my mother, what is that? She said, that's the 555 timer chip, and she made a clock. And from that point on, I was interested more in electronics. In the 9th grade, I went to George Westinghouse Vocational Technical High School, and in the 9th grade, they give you 4 exploratory shops. One of the shops that I wanted was electronics, but they decided to give me drafting, optical, jewelry making, and dental. Well, I went through drafting, I went through optical, and I went through dental, but when I started jewelry making, I started putting up a fuss that I really wanted electronics. So what they told me was, well, if you really want to get into electronics, you have to take a test. And there was about 25 of us that really wanted to get into electronics, so they gave us a test. I finished the test in about half the time that was allotted for us to take the test, and the teacher automatically accused me of cheating. I was suspended, and my mother had to come up to the school. When my mother got to the school, they gave her a hard time because she had to prove she was my mother. I'm not the oldest child, but my mother and I were only 15 years apart from each other. So she looked very young at that time. So when she finally got in, she asked the teacher one question. She said, who finished the test first? The teacher said Akbar didn't have the time. And then my mother asked, then who did he cheat off of? The teacher was silent. And she told the teacher that she went to school for basic electronics and she wanted to be a technician, but having 5 children, it was difficult for her to get a job. So she passed on all her knowledge to me. So what she knew, I knew, and then she said, I know much more because I have the curiosity to actually learn more. The time I made it to the 10th grade, I want to talk about this incident because this is important. I wrote a paper on Nat Turner because he was one of my heroes. And I didn't like reading, but the research was fascinating. I found 12 unique references that had nothing to do with each other. And I wrote this wonderful paper about Nat Turner just to get a C on it, which I was very upset because the person that also did Nat Turner used one reference, and the book that she used, I would never use it because it was poor and it only related Nat Turner as a criminal. So she get an A for that, and I got a C for all the work that I've done. And I made a fuss, and I was thrown out the class. I went to the dean's office. Then they sent me to my guidance counselor. My guidance counselor read my paper and said it was a good paper. And I asked her, I begged her to read the other girl's paper, and she realized that my paper was superior. So she went back to the teacher and said, you have to give him a better grade. So the teacher gave me a better grade, gave me an A-, and said he is not to come back to my class. So what do? I had to go over to the guidance counselor's office every time I had a history for the 10th grade, but the guidance counselor made her give me an A- for the semester. So I went out on that. But at the same time, I was doing little jobs for my guidance counselor, and she had me read things out loud to her. And she realized that my reading level wasn't as high as it should be, because here I am in the 10th grade, and she said I read at a 6th grade level. And she couldn't understand why the system just passed me through until I got into high school with a 6th grade level. So she made sure to it. On the time that I was with her, she had me come to school earlier, and during my lunch period, she gave me the remedial English that I needed. She gave me phonics, and she brought my reading level up to 11.2 before I got out of the 10th grade, just so I could be on track with my peers. I mentioned all that because the 9th, 10th, and 11th grades to me were eye-openers. And in the neighborhood that I lived in at the time, the police would do this thing called roundup. They would surround the basketball court or the park or wherever a group of Black people were gathered and detain us, handcuff some of us, and weed us out. They would take the older ones down to the precinct, and 9 times out of 10, they would release them. At one point, it was my turn. When I was old enough, I went down to the precinct, they fingerprint me, and basically let me go. And I believe this was just to get us on record, to make records of us after they do all the roundup and stuff. And after high school, but with all the rounduping, I was in front of the judge a lot, and the judge was tired of seeing me in the courtroom. So the judge told me, you have 2 choices. Either you go to jail or you go into the service. So right away, I by December of 1985, I joined the delayed entry program while I was still in high school to go into the military after I left school to go in 1986. But before I even talk about the military, I wanted to interject something that I've learned while I was in high school from one of my elders. I talked about the elders I'm talking about are the generation above my mother, the people that my mother looked up to. And I asked my Aunt Margie, I said, there's at least, I can count at least 20 to 25 females at that level of the generation and only one male. And I asked her, I said, where are all the men? This is on my mother's side. And they came from Luray, Virginia. She said, all the men in our family were lynched, except Tommy. We dressed him up as a female so he can escape that. So that's why they came up to New York from Luray during that time. So that, my family was wiped out basically, and it's a crime and nobody's done anything about it. Yes, that makes me angry, and then it makes me aware that they could do whatever they want to you if you expose yourself. In the military, let's go back to the military. I joined the military in August of 1986 after I graduated in June. And I miraculously went from E1 to E4 in 13 months. And normally that should take 26 months. So I felt that I was on my way to being a sergeant in the military. I was so proud of myself. But I didn't realize that I needed the recommendation or the push from a E6 sergeant and above, which I never got. Most of them said that I got my rank too fast and they would not allow me to go any further. So they basically put a cap on my career because they had the power to do so. I remember one time I was in Germany and we was on a 60-day field problem. And we used to pull guard, and the guard shift works this way. From sunset to sunrise, a soldier watches the sleeping people and everybody around, make sure nobody gets into the camp, no bull hogs or anything like that. We pretending that we're playing war. And we work guard for 2 hours, and then we sleep for 4, then on for 2. And it's supposed to be a rotation of soldiers to go through this. Now, there were 200 people in my unit, and 5 of us, only 5 out of the 200 had darker skin. And it seemed like every single night, the 5 of us had guard. So I approached my sergeant one time, the sergeant of the guard, and I asked him, said, why is that if there's a rotation that we are the only ones that have guard? And he said, I could do whatever I want with my niggers. So I'm quiet now, and I pulled them to the and I made sure nobody else could hear me. And I said, Sergeant, I drive a big truck here, and I have a lot of tools here. I said, I could bury you so deep, the dogs won't find you. And right away, he got so upset. He goes, attention. He got me at attention. He said, repeat what you said. And I didn't say anything. I said, I don't know what you're talking about, Sergeant. And he was making so much noise. The other soldiers around came around, and he tried to get me to say what I said. Then, I broke down crying and said, you're trying to entrap me to say something I didn't say. So he left. And about an hour later, he came back with the military police. There was vehicles everywhere. And he wanted them to arrest me. But since I didn't say what I said, they had no evidence that that I'd said anything. So they had to let me go. So that when I knew that I had to leave the service. And lucky for me, I got an honorable discharge. My first sergeant at the time said, please don't re-enlist. You're a troublemaker. I'm only a troublemaker because I always ask questions. I don't feel that I need to do something that you're not going to do. Don't ask me to do something that you're not going to do. When 8 months before I got out of the service, though, I did fall in love with a woman that had 2 children, and we got married. I left the service, but I'm not going to talk about that because that's a whole nother story. I left the regular Army in 1990, and I joined the National Guard in Virginia. I went to a 2-year trade school at the time to get my associate's degree in computer technology. I worked full-time, and then I had another part-time job teaching the Macintosh Apple computer. So I was burning the candle, what you say, on 3 ends, not 2 ends. 2 ends in the middle, and I was really tired. So I spent a lot of my time sleeping in class because I knew the work. It was kind of easy for me. So the teacher got upset and said, why are you sleeping in my class? I want you to leave. I said, no, you can't kick me out because I'm paying for the school. So I'm paying for it. It's not a public school. He said, well, why don't you test out of my class if you don't like it? I didn't know that that was an option. So I tested out of the class, and next thing you know, it's like all the classes I knew I could test out of, I test out of those classes. And I took what would have took 2 years to get my associate's degree. I did that in 13 months, got my associate's degree, and tried to get a job. And getting a job was very difficult in Virginia Beach because it just is who you know. I wound up landing a job in Northern Virginia, which worked out pretty good for me. And I was one of 25 technicians. And of course, when I first started out, I'm at the bottom of the list. I was probably the worst technician. I had nicknames like Akbar, that I hack at the machine before I get it going. Sometimes I break it even worse, but other people have to come in. But in about 6 to 8 months, I became one of the top 3 technicians. So I constantly trained myself over and over again, figuring out how fast I could take something down, bring it back to life, and actually learning the process, which they wasn't going to teach me. And I'm saying this because I remember going to a call in Fairfax, Virginia, and I drove up to the account, and I got to the place, the lights was on. I went into my car to get my tool bag, and I turned around. The shades was drawn, and I knew the shades were up before I parked the car. So I knocked on the door, rang the bell, and no one answered. Gave it about 5 minutes, knocked and rang the bell again. So I said, okay, I was gonna go to my car, drive to a payphone and make a phone call. But before I got to the car, 2 police cars, they kind of wedged me in. So I couldn't go nowhere. They rushed out of the car, said, put your hands up. I dropped my tool bag, put my hands up. Then they grabbed me, threw me on the hood of the car, handcuffed me. And I'm saying that I'm here to do a service job. And at the time, I seen a head peek out of the door, the place that I was trying to go in. And so I knew my contact name. So I yelled that name and said, I'm here to fix the copier. And they said, oh, no, officer, he's here to fix the machine. And so the officers uncuffed me, let me go. And I asked the lady, said, so why did you call the cops if you knew I was here to fix the machine? She said, you don't look like the normal technicians that come here. And it dawned on me that I was the only Black technician working for this company. I said, oh. So I knew that I had to be careful at that point what I've done, or any place I go to. Later on in my career, I was promoted to service manager of the Long Island office here in Long Island. My office was in Melville, Long Island. That was in 1997. When I got there, it was very uneasy. It was very uneasy because I had 15 technicians. 12 of them is what we call white today, and 1 was Spanish and 2 was from the Caribbean. 8 of the 15 were older than my own father. So here I am managing people, and they were older than me. I had to give them respect because they are older as my father. I respect my elders, but I'm their boss. And of course, they didn't like me. They didn't respect me. They wondered how I got the job. I got the job because there was 15 applicants for the job. My boss only sent me there as training to how to interview for a job. And I got the job because out of 1,600 officers, this office in Long Island was in the bottom 5. So nobody wanted that on their record. So I got the job anyway, basically to fail. But with my skills, and I'll show the technicians that I know their job and know how to do it a little bit better. So I showed them that I'm with them. And in 8 months, I turned that office around where we were in the top 5. So we went from the bottom 5 to the top 5 in 8 months, as far as service, as far as productivity, as far as income, because the big companies that did not pay us, I didn't send the text out to service them. And they said, you can't do that to the big companies. I said, well, you know, you take a place like a hospital that said, we pay in 90 days. 90 days in arrears, we always make our payments. So, and he said, well, I need a technician. I said, well, I'll wait till 90 days and I'll send the technician. That was my attitude all the time. I always had a little attitude. I didn't know how to tame myself sometimes. So I even had a customer that said, when I went to help the technician out, because he wanted to see the service manager, I walked in there and I'm the service manager. He said, you're not the service manager. I said, yes, I am. And he said that I can't do business with a company that hires people like you. So I called my my administrator and figured out what he had left on the books and gave him his money, and I had the truckers come take the machine. And of course, the region was upset with me with that because I lost the customer, but I'd rather not deal with people like that, and I had the power to do so. But bringing the office up to that speed, that fast, and the New York office was falling behind, I got promoted to the New York office, and they had about 54 technicians there. And I did the same thing. Worked with the technicians, made them believe that they're worth something, and pulled everybody up, and we did a great job. And took about a little bit longer, it's about 15 months to get them up to speed and everything, but we're running really good. And New York is really the flagship of the company. And for some reason, when my new director came, he didn't like my attitude, so he demoted me to a field tech, a high position field tech, and transferred me to the White Plains office. And I had to work, I lived on Long Island still, I had to work in Wapacha Falls, Beacon, all of this. So my commute was very long and coming home was very long. So they did that to try to make me quit. But I stuck it out. And a year later, I was called back to the New York office as a color specialist, because I was really good at fixing color copiers. Because even though I'm colorblind in one eye, I knew color is not what I see. It's what the customer sees, what the customer wants. And I figured out what they want, and I always made them happy, not me happy. So when I got there, all the hard work that I did in the city was gone. The 54 technicians, I made the 15th technician. And we needed to train our staff up again to bring them up to speed. So I started training people and bringing them up to speed, and we started bringing more people on. After I trained the fourth person, the company fired me. They said they didn't need me anymore. And, you know, that's really the job I've known for a long time. And it was really painful that they could do that. And so when I got another job, I was in there doing really well, you know, being a good technician, helping out everybody like I always do. And, you know, a little over a year in that position, same thing happened. I was fired. So the third job, the job that I have today, they wanted me to start helping out and training people. And I told them, I said, you know, I'm not training anybody unless you give me a stipend for training, at least $125 more on top of what I get per person that I train. He said, well, why would I do that? I said, because when you fire me, like the other two companies did, I want to have some money in reserve, because I'm getting older. I can't be looking for jobs that I have money in my pocket. So I need that money for training that you're going to give me for training. So they thought about it, said, well, you don't have to do any training. And I didn't have to do any training, and I got no training. So everybody else was being sent to upstate New York, to Jersey, to Atlanta for special training. And of course, I didn't get any. So a lot what I know today from that point on was all self-taught. You know, I YouTube, I experiment, try things, and I get fascinated by learning, because I realized that from the gift that I had earlier of taking things apart in my head first and then solving it was a divine gift that I didn't have nothing to worry about. So they could have all the schools they want. I had the best teacher already to take care of those things. But while in Long Island, though, working in the same company, I just wanted to mention a few experiences that I had out here. Went to a job that I was not allowed to go in. The customer did not want me there. But no one seemed to be able to get this machine working the way she needed to work. They had what they called a top technician, and they had everybody go there. So the vice president of sales said, he said, Akbar, I need you to come to this account. I said, that account doesn't like me. He said, don't worry, I'll be there. They're a friend of mine. So I walk in and I start walking to the machine, and the customer goes, don't you touch my machine. I look at the vice president, and he put his hand up and said, be easy. So I stepped back away from the machine. They already had this guy named Randy there, who was a master technician, and they had another guy named Mike there. He's a trainer. He trains everybody, so he's supposed to be smarter than everybody. And they couldn't figure this out. And then they finally, after messing with the machine, they turn around, and I tell them, you need to do this. And if this went on for like a half hour, I walked them through everything they needed to do to get this machine going. And then if everything's working, customer's happy, I looked at the vice president. I said, can I go now? He shakes my hand and goes, thank you very much. And the customer says, why are you thanking him? He didn't do anything. And that hit the boiling point. I said, you see, Mr. Jackson, this is why I can't deal with customers like her. I refuse to come to this account or any account like it. If she needs help in any way, shape, or form, I will not help. If a technician calls me and they tell me that they're here and they need help, I'm not helping them. She would just not get my services anymore, and she better hope the rest of them could do this. Another experience I got was the yacht club. I went to the yacht club in Stony Brook to install a machine. I get inside. There wasn't even, I don't think they were open for business yet because most of the chairs are still up. And she said, what are you here for? I said, I'm here to install a machine. She goes, you? I said, yes. She goes, no, not you. We don't need any service. So I drove off, and by the time I got back to 234, I'm heading back to the Bayshore area. I get a call from the boss, and I pulled over and talked to him on the phone. He said, the customer said, the technician that came out here doesn't know how to fix anything, did not do anything. I said, well, I never got a chance to do anything. They didn't let me in. I said, well, maybe it was a mistaken identity. I'm gonna let them know that you're coming back. So I turned around and I went back. And by then there were patrons in there. So I went in, and she came back out, and she said, in the doorway, she said, I told you before, we don't want your kind here. And I looked around the place. There was a lot of big men there. And I said, you know what? This is not the place for me to make a fuss, because, you know, the yacht club is on the water. And there was some big rocks there. I thought they would tie a rock to me and throw me in that water. So I got in my car and got out of there and never went back there whatsoever. And I have so many more experiences like that, where I'm thrown out of places that have to go back later to fix it because they want the best, and the best was there, which was me, because I trained myself to be better. Like my mother said, I always had to be twice as better than the other person. I couldn't be equal. I couldn't be even. There's no such thing of me learning something and be just as good as my white counterpart. I had to be twice as better in order to shine. And of course, they still get more than I did. But I'm not going to go through all those. And at this time, for the sake of time, you know, I've always had to watch my back and constantly trying to find a way to make people comfortable, make them comfortable for me to be in their presence, so they're not alarmed. You know, when I go into a neighborhood and I drive there, I realize they counted this nice big house, and it's a neighborhood that I would not be welcomed in. I would drive out of the neighborhood and get to a safe place and call the customer just to let them know that I'm coming, and I give them the make and model of my vehicle. I tell them that I have darker skin, what people would call African American. That way, there's no alarm when I get out that car and nobody calls the police. And also, when I get stopped by police, as many times I've been stopped, I learned that you must take everything out of your pockets, put everything on the dashboard, take your keys out the ignition, put them on the dashboard, and then put your hands above the steering wheel with them open so you feel less threatening, and roll down all the windows, no matter what time of the year it is, whether it's cold or hot, roll down all the windows. And I've done that, and it actually got me through a lot of times. But one time I really forgot to get the insurance out of my glove department. And I was nervous because it was getting dark, and the officers told me to go in the glove department and get the insurance. I said, I don't think I want to do that, officer. I said, officer, I'm going to put both of my hands out the window. I want you to handcuff me and take me out, and I would kneel down on the ground, you know, with my hands cuffed behind me on top of my head, any way you want to, and you can get the insurance. The officer said, what are you talking about? I said, officer, I'm trying to make it safe for me and not to alarm you. Please handcuff me so you can get my insurance. Officer started laughing and said, get the hell out of here. And I put my keys in the ignition, and I got the hell out of there. But you know, that's the way you feel all the time, because you never know when something's bad gonna happen, or which officer is gonna pull you over, or what this man is thinking at the time. So that's what I gotta look out for. And I mean, feeling feeling unwanted and not needed when I have so much to offer is frustrating. And, you know, even though I'm not a saint or nothing like that, but my faith in God has got me through a lot of this. And I'm not going to let the labels that the world have hinder me from doing anything. They can have as many labels, they can have a rap sheet, I don't care what they got. If it's meant for me to do something, I know I'll do it. And I'm going to re-up my time.
Thank you so much, Akbar. It was really wonderful, very moving. So I'd like to kind of first kind of close up this segment with some quotes. So I'm going to share my screen and then we're going to move to open it up for questions. So let me share again.
So as Vahid's getting ready to share his screen, if you have questions that you want to type into the chat box, please do that. Or like he said, there's a few short quotes. If not, you can also raise your hand, as you know, we showed in the beginning, to be able to actually just, voice your question as well. So those are the two options that you have.
So I want to leave, kind of close this session out with these two quotes from the writings in the sacred scripture of the Baha'i faith. And the first one says, "He who is your Lord, the all-merciful, cherisheth in his heart the desire of beholding the entire human race as one soul and one body. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established." So now I'd like to open the floor to questions. And like we mentioned before, if you have a question, please go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat box, whichever you feel more comfortable with. So maybe while we're waiting for people to think of some questions, I had a question I wanted to direct to Gary. I was just curious, do you think there was a difference in how you were treated as a person of color coming to the United States because you were not kind of raised in the United States, but you came from abroad coming to the United States? Was there, do you think there was, I mean, could you elaborate maybe on some of the, your experiences that may be different from maybe the typical person who was raised in the United States? You need to unmute, Gary. I think you're still muted.
Alana, you have to help your father.
I know.
I don't use Mac. I usually use okay. Yeah. Anyway, I think that initially, when I first came to the United States, a lot of people used to say to me, "Wow, you're not whatever, you're not whatever," and they would try to say, okay, like they would say, "Oh, are you black?" Or, "You're from Costa Rica, are you black?" I said, "Yeah, obviously I'm black." And they say, "But no, you're from Costa Rica." So I think that initially people would try to be courteous, understanding. But I think as time goes along, like that's sort of like change, especially I was in, when I went to Westbury, although Westbury was an integrated school, I was mostly in with most of the white kids, and some of the things they would say while I was there, so it really didn't matter much, because I guess they were saying that they used to say some of the things always, oh, those people, they're thieves, they're thugs, whatever. And I was right in the room with them. So I don't know, and I never really approached it back then. I let it go, but I think like if that ever occurred today, I would say something. I would speak up and say, that's not right, whatever. I don't know if I answer your question fully.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think in white American culture, there's a discrepancy. They really, it's strange. They treat Native, I feel like, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I feel like they treat Native Black Americans as somehow even belonging less than someone who has come from another country. But maybe I'm mistaken on that.
Yeah, that's a true statement in some cases, because I must say this, where I was in a class where there were a lot of people were from Jewish background, and they would always like bring me to their houses and and stuff like that. So I don't know why. Maybe what you're saying, where sometimes that happens, where people who are dark skinned but come from a different country, somehow they're more friendly to them, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I would think that's a true statement. Yeah, yeah, because.
So it looks like we have a question from, can I pronounce your name? Maybe you can pronounce it for me because it's just on your thing. You can go ahead and unmute.
I think Jackie has her hand raised. Yes.
Go ahead.
Gary, listening to you, I think this part, when I listen to what you went through and continue to go through, you and Akbar, but I knew you years ago. And I think about how clueless we were. I'll just say I was. I don't want to speak for others. But it's so painful. And I thought, not realizing what you went through, what so many people went through. I think today, my husband and I were talking about it. My hope is that more and more people, who think they're so open-minded will realize how much we've taken for granted, and these what are they called? You know what I'm saying?
Microaggressions, I think.
Thank you. Microaggressions of ignorance. Because I remember when you came to my house one time, we were going to go to a committee meeting. I think we were going up to Beacon or something. And I was living at my mother's. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I have never seen a Black face on my street before, let alone walking into my parents' home. And I realized, where has my head been? But I think I'm really hoping that, this isn't a question, but I'm hoping that at this time, perhaps we will become more aware and be more, let's say, refine when we think we're so open-minded and one world and unity and diversity, be more in tune with these microaggressions of maybe not speaking up or taking so many things for granted. So I just want to say, I'm really, for my ignorance and perhaps, my being so oblivious, I apologize. I do remember one time Beverly telling me, we were in a store and she says, watch, they're going to follow me. And I was shocked. Oblivious. And I remember being with Ed Duggar in the car and the police officer stopped us and I said, what the heck is he doing? What's the Jackie? Just calm down, let me take care of it. I was, I'd heard of it. It's very important for us to become much more aware. And it's very painful to hear how painful life is and has been. Thank God we have the faith and that we're willing and wanting to learn and be better, even within our faith. So thank you. And I'm really happy to see you. And I'm so sorry.
Thank you. It's never late. Thank you.
Well, I believe Ilana has a question. So if you could unmute and ask.
Oh, so I have some things from the chat. So the first question is from Saeed. He said that this is to Akbar. It says that you once explained how settling it is to be termed as African American. Do you want to talk about the term African American and what you think about that?
Oh yeah, I don't like being called an African American because I think it's discriminating. Because the German American doesn't have to put German American, the Thai American doesn't have to put Thai American, and so on and so forth. I am an American according to the 14th Amendment. It says anyone that is born in this country is an American. So why can I be called an American and like everyone else? By calling me African American, and you want to make me an other, and I don't think that's right. And so the choices on like applications and everything is meant to divide. And they said, well, we need to know the different cultures. Well, I don't have a culture. I'm from America. My culture was stripped from me from the slave masters. So I'm an American. Don't try to take that away from me now.
Bravo.
Yeah, right.
So Susan wants to share a story.
I want to.
Oh.
Wait.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to say bravo, Akbar. Bravo, Gary. You're opening a lot of eyes and a lot of hearts. And we all have different feelings that you're helping us dispel. It's very hard to open up to your friends, regardless of whether you're Baha'i or what faith, but you're doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
In regards to what Akbar was saying, if you've ever seen the movie Moscow on Hudson, there's a scene in there where the immigrants are being naturalized and becoming naturalized American citizens, and the judge that's in charge of the ceremony is saying there is no such thing as you're not a hyphenated American. You're not an Italian American or German American or an African American. You are an American. And I think that's absolutely true and the way it should be.
Okay, thank you. So there's a question in the chat box. It's from Fam Fun. I don't know who Fam Fun is, but
it's Hope.
Oh, Hope. So Hope says, thank you both for sharing your experiences. I'm thinking that you are both exemplary in the virtues of perseverance. So her question is, what do you think are the top 3 things we need to do as a country to bring true race unity to fruition?
Well, first they need to recognize that they have a race problem.
I think. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think also we need to have a dialogue constantly to be able to talk about this. We can't be because a lot of you are, you know, what I said earlier before, where we've been rigged to fail. And I think that we as Baha'is, we need to dialogue and talk. And, you know, you could ask me stuff and I could tell you whatever, because a lot of time you've been skewed. And I have heard them later Baha'is say to me, wow, but, you know, but how come they can't help themselves? You know, other nationality come by, and but it's that it's just against us the way it is, and it's, you know, the founding father did this purposely, you know. And if sometimes you wonder, like where, like with with the American male, where all the time like they would, uh, you know, charge like with rape and stuff like that, but like a lot of the founders, like they rape our women, you know, slavery. They rape the girls, you know, United States, you know, all of them, like they rape it. So it is something ingrained within the system where we are seen as like the bullies, you know, they're no guys, but these are the guys who are doing things that are horrendous to our ladies, but nobody knows that. And I think as we keep that dialogue, we realize what some of the thing the founding father did was atrocious.
And I think you're right. Having this dialogue is so important. And I was so happy to hear that we're going to have this monthly, because I invited a coworker of mine, and also a friend, another friend of mine. And so if we can do this again, I'm sure that I can, they'll be able to come the next time. And it probably is one of the most important things, to keep the dialogue open, because we can't get to the other side until we realize where we are, right? Like you said, Akbar, we need to realize that this is, I'm very hopeful that as a country, we are getting there. We are realizing that we need to do this very important work to get us where we should be, where we need to be.
Thank you. Susan wants to share a story. Susan, can you unmute? Susan, I can't hear you. I don't know if you're talking. Make sure you're unmuted.
She's still muted.
Okay. On the bottom of your screen, there's a button that says mute. Make sure you press it to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I think some of you know my son Zach. He's 40 now, but when he was about 10 or 11 years old or so, we lived in North Amityville. And when we got there, it was all white people. While we were there, some black families moved in. Some of the white people started moving out. So Zach was friends with everybody. That's how he is still. And one time, the person next door to us, a white girl, her bike was stolen. And all of a sudden, a whole group of white parents came to our door, banging on the door, asking, and they demanded to see Zach, this little 10-year-old kid. And, you know, I had Jaleh. Jaleh was a baby. And these people are banging on the door, screaming at us that they have to talk to Zach, and yelling and screaming. I was so scared. You know, these were our neighbors. We didn't let Zach come and talk to them. That was crazy. But apparently they had this idea that Zach knew who had stolen the bicycle because he was friends with all of the black kids. And they wanted to ask him who it was who stole the bicycle. It turned out, I guess a couple of weeks later, it was actually stolen by some gang group that was stealing bikes and fixing them and painting them and reselling them. So it had nothing to do with any of the kids in the area. But I just thought I would relate that. Okay, I'm muting again.
Yes, thank you, Susan. Does anyone else want to say anything or have any questions? I just want to, if you can look in the chat box, Naomi sent a message saying that the next meeting is going to be July 17th at 7:30. And if you want the link for it, you can email her, or you can put your email in the chat box right now. Her email is in the chat box. So she can send you a reminder and a link for the next meeting, or you can put your email in the chat box, or you can email her.
I'm going to try to keep the link the same as long as Zoom allows me to do it, but just in case, it would be good for you to email me or send me your email, so that way I'll have it. Thank you.
I see we have another hand up. Jim, if you could unmute yourself and address your question.
Okay, I was rather surprised one time with a friend. I grew up in Wisconsin, and my high school had one black man going to it, black boy going to it, but he was 3 classes ahead of me. So I never hung out with him because I didn't hang out with anybody from that class. But I thought he was great. He was an athlete. He seemed like a great guy. But it surprised me one time when I was working for Hewlett Packard in California that I was with a girlfriend one time, and we were driving through Sacramento, and we wanted to go to the train museum, and we were having a hard time finding it. So I stopped, and there were 2 guys across the street underneath the hood of a car, and they were black guys. But I just saw 2 guys over there and just call out the window, and as soon as I started to slow down and roll down my window, my girlfriend started saying, "No, don't do it." And I didn't even have time to react to her. And I asked them, I says, "Do you know where that railroad museum is?" And they answered back, and so we went there, and then she talked about that. She says, "I can't believe you did that." It says, "What are you afraid of anyway?" So I never really understood the fear. I never had any anger towards black people, and so I've had a hard time understanding this because I've never felt that way towards black people, but I don't know how I would stop other people from feeling that way. So sometimes I wonder if it's just some part of that discrimination is people just being jealous, you 2 guys in particular, being jealous of your feeling threatened by your intelligence and your abilities, that they're afraid of their jobs or whatever. If you have any reflection on how much of a component it is that maybe they're actually afraid of you rather than just more angry at you.
So
I had an experience.
Go ahead.
We were friendly with a couple of color, and so we would go places together. And I can think of 2 instances, especially where we went to this Chinese restaurant, and we ordered our dinners. And we sat there and sat there and sat there. We watched people come in and finish their dinner and leave. So finally, my husband got up and said, "What's going on?" And they made up some silly excuse of why we hadn't been served yet. And we realized that we weren't being served because we were together. And another time we were going to another place, and we went to this country store, and we walked around to the store, and my friend found something that she wanted, and so she went to pay for it, and they would not accept her money. So I offered to pay for it, and they wouldn't accept my money if it was going to be for what item that she wanted. And it just, not to be served in the restaurant until late. And so we walked out, of course we walked out of the store. And just those two instances made me realize what they go through, because the woman in the country store was adamant that she would not accept any money for my friends.
Thank you for sharing that, Bernice. I wanted to just add one thing, what Jim brought up, and that is that I think we in America don't realize how we've been programmed to fear the Black male. It's so suffused in our culture that we swim in it, and we don't even understand it or realize it. It's in all of our media. It's on purpose, and it's been this way since time immemorial, and it's just there. So I don't think it's surprising, what your experience was. I mean, maybe you kind of are an anomaly, but I think it's just instinctual, and it's programmed in our culture, this fear.
Yeah, that's awful.
Somebody have to run up.
Brother Khaled got his arm up.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's sometimes it's cultural too. Like the brother was saying, when I was a young man, someone mentioned North Amityville was majority Caucasian at one point. And the same thing with Bedford-Stuyvesant. When I was a kid, in my elementary school, I was the only Black kid in Bedford-Stuyvesant in the elementary school. And the neighborhood began to change, little by little until it became majority African-American or Black. But I had the same cultural shock because I was raised mainly around Caucasians. And the first time I went to Harlem, I was like, man, it just blew my mind. I was nervous. I was scared because I had never been around that many Black people in my life. I was a young man. And so it took time as the neighborhood changed in Bedford-Stuyvesant that I was hanging around African Americans all the time, that I began to understand African Americans in terms of, like, for example, culturally, when we say we have a fight, we're talking about something physical. I mean, like punching each other. But being around Caucasians, they would say they had a fight, but it was just an argument. It was just something verbal. And so being around in the African-American culture, as I began to be around African-Americans more, I experienced more physical fights than verbal fights. And I had to learn how to defend myself, how to speak a certain way. Even though you're not going to fight, you have to be able to sound like you're ready to fight. So you talk in a more assertive tone and loud, but that doesn't mean you're going to hurt anyone. It's just in order to back people off of you. So I'm just saying that a lot of times, this is for my European American brothers and sisters, is like, it's not that you're racist, it's just that you haven't been exposed to the culture. So that's what's making you uneasy. It's not that, it's not that you hate anyone. You just have not been exposed to the other culture. The other thing I would say is that, when they say Black Lives Matter, that's only to bring us to equality. But the goal is not Black Lives Matter. The goal is human life matters. All human life matters. But I've been conditioned to believe, I'm talking as an African American, as a Black person. I was trained not to value my life and my people's life as much as I value Caucasian or white life. And that's something that was done to me, that was put in me, to see white people and their lives as more valuable than my own life. And the final thing I would say is that the Black man is always has to be cautious. There are things that white men can do without even thinking about it that I have to be cautious about. For example, I would never go to a cash machine late at night, like at midnight or anything like that, because if a police officer is driving by the bank and sees me as a Black man in that cash machine, in that area at night, more than likely I'm going to have a problem. They're going to pull up, check me out to see what I'm doing in there. If I'm in a building and I'm getting on an elevator, or I'm in a building and no one's around and there's a Caucasian woman and I'm the other person getting ready to get on the elevator, I can see the fear usually in the Caucasian woman's face, or I sense it. So I will not get on the elevator or tell her you can get on, and stay off the elevator. So there are a lot of times that this experience has made my life where I have to always be concerned as a Black person, as an African American. I have to always be thinking ahead. So I just wanted to share those kind of things.
Thank you so much. That was really insightful, and we really appreciate you sharing those experiences with us. So we're coming now to 8:37. Are there any other questions, or if not, maybe we should kind of wrap this up. And I'd like to really thank our two panelists for really taking the time. And this is, you should understand, I don't think this is an easy thing for either of them to do, to really open up in this way, in such an intimate fashion, and share these really, which must be painful experiences with us. So I want you to know, Gary and Akbar, that we really, really appreciate you doing this for us.
I'd like to say something.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was growing up, my mother came from Tokyo, Japan, and my sister was in the gifted and talented. She was 4 years younger than me. And I came out, breech birth. I was noted as having learning disability, and it was very hard for me because sometimes my sister would have the same teachers as me, and they said that I was no good, and they praised my sister all the time. And I had that for years to come when my sister started going to school. So it was very hard being an Asian American.
Yes, thank you for sharing with us. So I'd like to thank everybody for again, the questions you've asked and for joining us in this, and remind you that we're going to do this next month on the 17th. And like Naomi said, we see a couple of emails here. If you want to remember, you can leave your email, and she can you'll be contacted for the Zoom.